make up the United States. To understand how black projects began and how they continue to function today, one must start with the creation of the atomic bomb. The men who ran the Manhattan Project wrote the rules about black operations. The atomic bomb was the mother of all black projects, and it is the parent from which all black operations have sprung. Building the bomb was the single most expensive engineering project in the history of the United States. It began in 1942, and by the time the bomb was tested inside the White Sands Proving Ground in the New Mexico high desert on July 16, 1945, the bomb's price tag, adjusted for inflation, was $28 billion. The degree of secrecy maintained while building the bomb is almost inconceivable. When the world learned that America had dropped an atomic weapon on Hiroshima, no one was more surprised than the U.S. Congress, none of whose members had had any idea it was being developed. Vice President Harry Truman had been equally stunned to learn about the bomb when he became President of the United States on April 12, 1945. Truman had been chairman of the Senate Special Committee to investigate the National Defense Program when he was vice president, meaning he was in charge of watching how money was spent during the war. Yet he'd had no idea about the atomic bomb until he became president and the information was relayed to him by two men, Vannevar Bush, the president's science advisor, and Henry L. Stimson, the nation's Secretary of War. Bush was in charge of the Manhattan Project and Stimson was in charge of the war. The Manhattan Project employed 200,000 people. It had 80 offices and dozens of production plants spread out all over the country, including a 60,000-acre facility in rural Tennessee that pulled more power off the nation's electrical grid than New York City did on any given night. And no one knew the Manhattan Project was there. That is how powerful a black operation can be. After the war ended, Congress, the legislators who had been so easily kept in the dark for 2.5 years, was given stewardship of the bomb. It was now up to Congress to decide who would control its unimaginable destructive power. With the passing of the Atomic Energy Act of 1946, a terrifying and unprecedented new system of secret-keeping emerged. The presidential system was governed by presidential executive orders regarding national security information. But the newly created Atomic Energy Commission, formerly known as the Manhattan Project, was now in charge of regulating the classification of all nuclear weapons information in a system that was totally separate from the president's system. In other words, for the first time in American history, a federal agency run by civilians, the Atomic Energy Commission, would maintain a body of secrets classified based on factors other than presidential executive orders. It is from the Atomic Energy Act of 1946 that the concept "born classified" came to be, and it was the Atomic Energy Commission that would oversee the building of 70,000 nuclear bombs in 65 different sizes and styles. Atomic Energy was the first entity to control Area 51, a fact previously undisclosed, and it did so with terrifying and unprecedented power. One simply cannot consider Area 51's uncensored history without addressing this cold, hard, and ultimately devastating truth. The Atomic Energy Commission's restricted data classification was an even more terrifying anomaly, something that could originate outside the government through the thinking and research of private parties. In other words, the Atomic Energy Commission could hire a private company to conduct research for the commission, knowing that the company's thinking and research would be born classified, and that even the President of the United States would not necessarily have a need to know about it. In 1994, for instance, when President Clinton created, by executive order, the Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments to look into secrets kept by the Atomic Energy Commission, certain records involving certain programs inside and around Area 51 were kept from the president on the grounds that he did not have a need to know. 2 of these programs, still classified, are revealed publicly for the first time in this book.